scared for reals.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
And Adam Perry.
All right, before we get into this special 70th anniversary edition of Godzilla, I just want to remind you to subscribe, like the channel, so whenever you log in or open up your YouTube, does it make like a little ding sound, Adam? Or
sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Just open up your app or log in, and you'll get like a red dot at the one at the top of the screen, how many things you're subscribed to. But yeah, we don't want to miss out on an episode. We do our best in getting episodes up at least once a week, so you can listen to something new, especially if you love cinema. And you know, movies, film, cinema, in my opinion, doesn't get much better than the original 1954 Godzilla, Ishiro Honda's masterpiece. Some say it's like one of the greatest monster movies ever made. I say it's one of the greatest movies ever made, period. And what a mammoth achievement. And the thing is, Adam, even though the original Godzilla is 70 years old, it might as well be 20 years old in America because we didn't get to see it until 2004.
Right.
I mean, I grew up like you did watching the Raymond Burr heavily edited movie. It was kind of a cool B movie kind of vibe. You get the idea that Roger Corman was kind of involved with that. Mm-hmm. But watching that, when I saw that, Japanese version, like literally that, I didn't know it was in theaters that summer. I lived in near Burlington, Vermont at the time, and they got some movies like that, but something like Godzilla, probably New York City, the big metropolitan areas. But it was kind of unheard of. Even trying to get an import, from what I understand, I mean, Toho was very strict with their products. I know I've kind of brought it up in the past, but Toho, of course, owned the rights to Godzilla, and a lot of that stuff you could get the original Godzilla, I think, probably on DVD, VHS, Betamax, whatever, but you couldn't get the subtitles.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really hard to get outside of Japan. So it was such a blessing that we got to see it like in its entirety in 2004. Mm-hmm. But man, what a behind the scenes story this was.
Yeah,
I don't know. You read some of it, didn't you?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So the producer of who was involved in the making of Godzilla, he literally, Tomoyuki Tanaka, they were in the process of making this Indonesian Japanese production. Mm-hmm. And a few months into 1954, they really had nothing. So he had to go back, tell his bosses at the studio, well, that's done. So he literally had to come up with something before he met with them. Just imagine the pressure, Adam. I don't know. Yeah. I don't do well under pressure. Some people are so creative. It doesn't matter if they're under pressure or not. They can come up with something. I need time to develop my thoughts. But this guy, literally on a flight back from the disastrous meeting in Indonesia, he looks down and all of a sudden he has an idea of like a monster, a dinosaur monster that gets awakened because of a nuclear bomb. Now, keep in mind, a very successful B movie came out in America in 1953, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it yet.
It literally starts off, boom, you get an atomic explosion and this monster's born.
Right.
And
just like, I mean, that's kind of like the norm for most of these 50s sci-fi.
Oh, yeah, especially in America.
Yeah.
In America, that was the thing. There was some sort of nuclear disaster, and either a man is turned into a monster, as we saw many times, or some sort of creature would morph. Yeah. In The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, it's easy to see some of the similarities between the two.
Right.
But that's about it. Just a couple of the disaster sequences of ships at the beginning of each movie, and that's pretty much the only similarities between the two, because if you've seen the Japanese version, it's not like any other monster kaiju. That's what they call it in Japan, kaiju movies. There's just nothing else like it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with Ishiro Honda himself. And the guy literally served in the Japanese Imperial Army. He was in the Japanese occupied part of China. As you know, the March of Manchuria.
Yep.
If you've ever read about that, it's pretty intense, graphic, bloody, horrific. Mm-hmm. And the guy was a prisoner of war, too. 1945. Wow. He literally was a prisoner of war. And him and his brothers in service saw the devastation of Hiroshima on their way back. So I think this is what makes Godzilla such a powerful film. And the name Godzilla, it was kind of like a name that was thrown around, but they don't really think there was any significance to the name. It was just a cool sounding name. Mm-hmm. But there were some rumors, but I think the reason why the original Godzilla is just so powerful and it's not tongue in cheek, like you and I are used to the B-movie quality of the Godzilla films, the campiness. Sure. And, Ishiro Honda didn't really want to do any other Godzilla movies. He would later do probably some of the best Godzilla movies, but he always had some satire in it because he didn't really want to do any other Godzilla movies. Obviously, money calls, and we've had this discussion many times. It's hard to turn down the money.
Yeah.
But this movie it feels so personal because it's not so much that this creature was made out of the nuclear bomb. It kind of is like an analogy for the bomb, It's just, and there's just so many things that kind of happened before the movie developed. Especially, I'm trying to remember the name of the ship off the top of my head. But this fishing boat from Odo is literally destroyed with one survivor. That's how the movie starts off. And if you were in Japan at the time, you were probably freaked out because there was literally a boat that was destroyed by the U.S. testing nuclear bombs in 1954. It was like in March of 1954. This movie got released in November. Talk about art imitating life, so to speak. And that's the thing. Ishiro Honda, before he did Godzilla, he did a couple of war movies, and he did documentaries. And if you watch Godzilla, some of that stuff you think is real footage.
I mean, it very well could. I mean, we're talking.
It wasn't though. They literally filmed it a certain way, but the way he filmed it felt like it was a real documentary,
right?
In certain scenes.
I mean, when you see the stuff, close up in person, that's got to leave an impact on your vision, and especially if you're a creative person and you're trying to kind of convey that.
Right.
That, I mean, I can only imagine what those poor people went through when those bombs were dropped.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of casualties.
And to think we were going to drop a third if
well, we were doing nuclear testing still in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, and that's the reason why I think this movie was not seen in America is there was a lot of people, critics, of course, politicians that thought this movie was anti-American.
Right.
And Ishiro Honda is like, no, this is anti-nuclear. They don't even mention America in the movie. They just mention that how this is going to be. It's going to, like, literally the last line of the movie, Takashi Shimura literally says, if we don't stop using nuclear weapons, there will be more Godzillas. It's just such a haunting movie.
Right.
And I did find the name, the Japanese fishing vessel, the Lucky Dragon No. 5. And if you look really closely at the boat, that the vessel that's destroyed at the beginning, there's like one of those survival life jacket raft things. It says No. 5 on there. So it's,
oh wow.
There were no coincidence. I mean, you have to look really quick at stuff like that. But what happened was the Lucky Dragon No. 5, they had all this radioactive fallout because they dropped this 15 megaton, what they call it, Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb. The boat's catch was contaminated, of course. This was a tuna fishing boat, so the tuna was distributed to many, many people.
Yeah.
So I don't know why no one talks about this. It's kind of like not even a footnote.
Right.
But this was a huge deal at the time. I don't even think the Japanese talk about it, but they probably want to try to forget it. But it's just the devastating consequences of even testing nuclear weaponry.
Yeah, I mean, like the topic's so controversial,
right?
Again, I mean, if we were talking about World War II, I'm not going to say what we did was wrong, but because I really think when you look at the bigger picture of that war and the way it was going, there really wasn't a choice because not to say again to kill so many innocent lives it was the right thing to do, but I think the way our government looked at it, and I mean, again, this is 80 years ago. We weren't even a thought in our parents' eye. Our parents weren't even a thought in their parents' eye. So, but just from what I've read about World War II, I mean, it was kind of one of those things where, like, it happened. We did it. It probably wasn't the best idea, but man, did it give the whole world a big wake-up call and warning of what the human race is capable of. And,
right.
Like I said, I mean, if you know anything about World War II, you got Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Tokyo was next.
Yeah.
If Japan didn't surrender.
Oh.
So, I mean, there were so many more occupied civilians in Tokyo than either Nagasaki. So it's
because the Japanese way is never to surrender.
Yeah, it is so. I mean, it's really scary still to this day to think about, especially what's going on in the world now. But. Yeah, and this was the catalyst for these movies,
right?
And we look at them now, with the giant monster movies, the tarantulas, the Godzillas, the King,
right?
It's kind of silly and hokey, but I mean, this was a legit fear in the 50s.
I mean, even watching this movie today, Adam, if you're not moved when watching this movie, it's like, are you human? I mean, it is so unusual, even to today's standards, to have such a powerful, gut-wrenching, horrific, terrifying. I mean, this is a truly terrifying film from start to finish. I just can't imagine it because you and I have never been under nuclear attack.
Yeah.
These people going to the movie theater in 1954, seeing a vessel that had just several months prior got destroyed because of nuclear testing. I just can't imagine being in that audience and not being like freaked out. Did this happen again?
Right. I mean, well, again, it's 80 years span. I mean, I think of where we've come as a society. I mean, I don't know about you, Chris, but I mean, like, obviously there was fear of nuclear war from our grandparents, and then our parents prepared for nuclear war with the get under your desk drills,
the Cold War
like
era,
in the Cold War. And by the time I was in school, we weren't doing anything like that.
No.
So like, so much has changed in 80 years, but so.
There's just so much still the same with their war. Black Sabbath. You and I enjoy Black Sabbath. War Pigs, definitely all about our politicians that love to go to war.
Right.
And that's the reason why we have the nuclear bombed anyways, because that's what the politicians wanted and governments. And anyway, but it's just that's what the movie simply was about. And of course, people interpret art in so many different ways. But it's like I watched a movie and it definitely wasn't pointing the finger at just America. It was pointing the finger to the entire human race.
It was a warning.
Yeah.
A warning.
Right. And it's so personal because a guy who actually lived through all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't in town when they dropped the bomb. Obviously, he probably wouldn't have been around to tell the story. But gosh, the guy was a prisoner of war. The guy just wanted to be a filmmaker. He did some documentaries. Then he got drafted. It wasn't like I'll go. He got drafted. He didn't want to go, but he served his country, and he thought he was doing the right thing. And being a prisoner of war, I mean, you don't get a lot of filmmakers with that kind experience with them.
Yeah.
So Shiro Honda he made this. This is probably his finest achievement, the one out of the movies I've seen. He didn't really want to become a monster movie director. That wasn't his forte, but I mean, he went on to do Mothra, Rodan, all the big monster movies in Japan. I mean, King Kong versus Godzilla. He did Godzilla versus Mothra, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I mean, all of the significant earlier Godzilla movies, most of them he was responsible for.
Very cool.
Yeah, so
Very cool.
you got Ishiro Honda, who again wasn't the first choice. They tried to get the guy who was going to direct the Indonesian co-production, but he thought he kind of like monster movie. He couldn't wrap his head around it. And again, this was probably, you got to remember, this is another thing. Not only was a movie of this nature not done before, but there was never any such thing in Japan as a monster movie or something of that nature. I mean, they did have the U.S. influence because when the U.S. occupied, they had access to the universal monsters. We talked about The Invisible Man Appears, which came out in 1949. And we can't talk about Godzilla without talking about Eiji Tsuburaya. I'm horrible at pronouncing Japanese names. But this guy went to the cinemas in the 30s and watched King Kong. And the guy was just hooked. The guy wanted to make a movie using stop motion and all that kind of stuff like King Kong. So, I mean, he did The Invisible Man Appears. Yep. He literally was so good at creating those, what do you call them, the smaller scale templates. I'm trying to think of the name for it. Like the city, but a smaller version. You know what I'm trying to say.
Set like modeling or
like a mini set, of that kind of nature.
A scaled model of a city.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the technical term right, but Eiji Tsuburaya, I mean, he was the go-to guy. He literally filmed the Pearl Harbor attack, and everyone thought it was the real thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, and I don't even know what movie it was. I just remember seeing some images when they were this documentary about Eiji Tsuburaya, and it's like this guy knows how to create set pieces. Yeah. We talk about Ridley Scott now. Guy has a good eye, but you watch the original Godzilla, and it's like you think a giant monster is literally demolishing a city, even though it's just a tiny set.
Yep. Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, he had quite the team working with him. And the interesting thing is, I think for some reason they were going through different ideas of what Godzilla would look like. They even held like an open call to artists to send in what they think Godzilla should look like. There was this simian-looking monster with a mushroom head. And then there was like an octopus kind of looking creature.
Interesting.
And then they finally decided on like a dinosaur type of creature. Now, I'm not good with my dinosaur verbiage, Adam. I don't know are you a dinosaur guy?
I mean, not really, but I mean, clearly Godzilla.
But Tyrannosaurus Rex, a combo.
Like a T-Rex would look like, yeah.
A Guadacon, and then a Stegosaurus, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, instead of having just the one, they had like the 3 sets of those back plates.
Yep.
And give it a nice, distinct look for sure. And they went through a few different models, but the third and final model they called the Alligator Godzilla.
Okay.
It had that horrible kind of look because they wanted to give it a feel that the atomic bomb really had an effect on the creature. So a gentleman, Tokumitsu, who actually just recently passed away, I think he was like 89 years old or something, but Tokumitsu designed the suit, and he blocked out the body cavity for the suit actor. I mean, got to breathe. It still wasn't very ventilated. I mean, they could only do a few minutes, and sometimes they'd pass out.
Oh, wow.
They literally would pass out. And they say it's like over a huge cup of water of sweat. And sometimes that blocked so they couldn't see. I mean, you had a hard time seeing. I seen they're tiny holes. Right. So if you sweat, it kind of blocks out, and of course, sweat gets in your eyes. It stings. And I've worn some suits, nothing like that though.
Right.
I mean, the suit was made with thin wires, bamboo wrapping, and chicken wire for all the support, and it was covered with fabric and cushions. And for the skin, they put this huge block of latex and they melted it in a large barrel, stirred by hand. Okay.
Yep.
They put up like small details on the skin. They just apply more latex. And it was like a charcoal gray color, and that was the color of Godzilla until like 2000. But they tried that, and it didn't work because it weighed 200 pounds. The guys couldn't move.
Yeah.
How can you move? And they scaled it back, but it was still like 150 pounds. So they could move, but they couldn't really move fast.
Yeah.
But it kind of gives the monster a more mysterious thing. It was kind of like Shane. I hate to use an analogy so out there like this, but remember the movie Shane? Did you ever watch that?
Yep.
Jack Palance slowly getting off the horse because he was terrified.
Yeah.
Well, that became like the definitive thing. So the monster slowly marching through. You don't know what's going to happen, and it gives it like an intensity.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, yeah, 2 liters in height. Wasn't a very tall costume, but it's like you watch the movie, and it's just incredible, the genius of Tsuburaya and his effects.
Right.
And for the close-ups of the feet scrunching everything, literally part of the costume with suspenders.
Yeah.
Literally, you've probably seen some behind the scenes of a guy like in a shirt and suspenders just walking around with the bottom. That was for the close-ups. And then for like the close-ups of just the top of Godzilla, they had a puppet.
Yeah.
So the puppet would blow out some of this hot water. It wasn't hot water, but it was kind of like a watery substance, but with a certain tint, it looked like it was fire.
Oh, cool.
So this is why black and white is so great, because as we've talked about before, black and white or shooting at night hides a lot of the imperfections.
Sure.
You know, that's one thing Ridley Scott was like, we're going to shoot things at night. This is great. Hides all the little mistakes, but that gives it, like you and I have talked about, computers, they kind of take away the human aspect of it. And this movie is just blood, sweat, and tears of these amazing creative geniuses. Just
well, I mean, they had no choice. They had to they had to make it work.
And that's the thing. There was never a monster movie in Japan before.
Yeah,
there was never anything like it. And Tsuburaya again wanted to do the King Kong approach, but the problem was they had no technology for that. They had no one that over there that knew how to do that. He literally said it would take 7 years for them to do it that way.
Yeah.
So he had to come up with something in like a few months' time.
Yeah.
So let's do the monster suit. And again, there was nothing to go by, so they were kind of just trial and error, and there was more errors than trial.
I mean, this became Japanese filmmaking. Like,
right.
It became their MO.
Yeah, well, but at this point, nothing had been done.
I know. I'm giving him credit as to how innovative. I mean, even to today.
Yeah.
You see every time something from Japan comes out, whether it's everything from a horror movie like the new Godzilla that just came out to Power Rangers.
Right.
This people in costumes on a small scale scaled set, tromping around destroying stuff. I mean, it's just it's what they do, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it is really cool. And Toho had this huge gallons and gallons of, like, it looked like a mini lake.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of water. It wasn't a lake. They literally dumped in some water to make it look like it was like you're in a vast sea, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And that body of water became Tokyo Bay. It became whatever body of water they wanted. And there were some, I mean, obviously King Kong is still like the banner monster movie.
Right.
And there are still hints of some of the influence. I mean, you can't get away from it. Like, literally at the beginning of the movie, there's the island folklore of Godzilla. That's just this old guy reminiscing about Godzilla. We have to do this dance to exercise, so Godzilla doesn't eat us and destroy us. And, well, that didn't last too long.
No.
But they literally do. They have like this little island dance that kind of makes it seem, something out of King Kong. You know how they're doing their little island dance, and it's just masterful the way that it was all done. And I mean, it was a little tip of the hat to King Kong, that little sequence on the island, where they get King Kong. And it was shot on location at a real island in the Southern Pacific. I can't remember the name of the island off the top of my head, but some of it was shot on location. But most of it was shot on the studio. And Toho, like Universal and, all of the great movie places that, Paramount had an awesome movie set. And but they had their own. And Toho had, like, probably one of the best.
Yeah.
And it was just masterful, all you could do on a movie set. The matte paintings, and they literally put the matte paintings through this type of glass to make it look like it was like real, but it was just a matte painting.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's just incredible, getting behind the scenes. You lift up the curtain a little bit and find out what goes on, and it was just
And like I said, the scale models with with the monster.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's so. Japanese cinema. I mean, even I saw a hilarious little. I don't know if you would call it a GIF, a GIF, or it wasn't a meme because it was actually moving. But the caption said, "Meanwhile, or like an average afternoon in Japan,"
right?
And the camera pans over, and it's just like a normal picture of Tokyo, but as the camera pans over, you see Ultraman and like Mega Godzilla fighting, and people just going about their business. So like a giant, it's hilarious.
Ultraman, yeah, that's another member of the huge infinite kaiju universe. Yeah, Ultraman, but they call it suit animation. I think that or suitmation. It's they created that form of special effects, suitmation.
Very cool.
Yeah, and. I mean, those just the miniature sets alone. It's incredible,
and it's a technique still used today, which is super cool, and it doesn't really get old.
They don't talk about how long it took to plan all this, but the principal photography ran 51 days, and the special effects photography ran 71 days.
Wow!
I could run it for 71 years, and I couldn't even create something cool like that. It's just awe-inspiring and just incredible. And we might know, Adam, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, and no one behind the scenes would ever imagine that Godzilla would be the longest running film franchise of all time.
Yeah.
70 years, and now they're looking into doing the DC Godzilla Kong crossover. It's like, ugh.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're clearly trying to make some sort of monsterverse with the last few movies that have come out.
Well, they have, and now, but they're to do it with DC Comics. But if Toho doesn't like something,
right,
they'll pull the plug on it because it's theirs. They don't own the rights to King Kong or to Godzilla.
Yeah, I don't know how a crossover with DC Comics would go. I mean, again, unless you had a really good writer and then followed by really good execution, I mean, as a DC Comics fan, I don't see.
It's like a Justice League, King Kong.
Yeah,
Godzilla.
I kind of don't see where it fits.
No,
where yeah, that's a weird combo, but hey,
So I'm not going to get into the plot of Godzilla because we already know pretty much what it's all about. But yeah, Godzilla symbolizing nuclear holocaust from Japan's perspective. It's very powerful, and of course, I'm not going to get into a lot of the academic scholar interpretations of what all that stuff means. But it is interesting though how they film a love triangle in this movie. Okay.
Yeah.
There's this troubled doctor who's engaged to this young lady who's her dad is a famed paleontologist. Mm-hmm. He's the one that, and he's played by Takashi Shimura, and he brought a lot of clout to the movie because he was such a revered actor. He was in Seven Samurai. He was the head leader of the samurai.
Gotcha.
He was in a lot of Akira Kurosawa films.
Yeah,
and he brought a lot of clout to the movie. So not only do you have, the entertainment monster stuff, you also have an established esteemed Takashi Shimura co-starring in this movie. For some reason in the movie, it doesn't really go into too many details. The head actor of the movie is Akira Takarada. Akira Takarada, he was like 20 years old. He goes onto the set. I'm the star of the film. And they was like, no, Godzilla's the star.
Yep.
So he got kind of a reality check as soon as he stepped onto the set. But Akira Takarada is the main male character in the movie. He's seeing this woman named Amiko, and Momoko Kochi is also a newcomer. I think she was like maybe a year or two older than him. Hiko Hirata, who is a prominent character actor. He was in some of Kurosawa's movies as well. He plays Dr. Serizawa. Now, and I know the original script, Takashi Shimura's character who plays Yamane, Dr. Yamane, who is the paleontologist, he doesn't want to see Godzilla die. Because he's like, how does this creature survive all of this nuclear bombing? How does it make him stronger? There's something there. He wants to study it, but the original script had Takashi Shimura's character be some sort of mad scientist guy. Wore a black cloak and kind of looked like a stereotypical mad scientist. Yeah. Thankfully, that got changed. But there was a deeper love triangle, and I'm glad they kind of made it more subtle. But Serizawa is engaged to Dr. Yamane's daughter, Amiko, but she is seeing Akira Takarada's character, Ogata, on the side, so it's kind of like a big deal in Japan. You don't do that. Yeah. It's something that's not really discussed in our culture. It's like an everyday, every second occurrance. Marriage isn't as sacred as it used to be. But in Japan, at that time, that was a huge deal.
Well, even in Japan now, I mean, we're talking about culture, education, morality. Japan is an entirely different world than what we're used to here in the States. I mean, like, I know just from, interest and research I've done myself, because I do love studying about Japanese culture, especially having my interest in the martial arts and stuff like that. Yeah. But like education, for example, the kids in Japan don't even start reading and doing math until like the third grade. Like when they go to school, like kindergarten, like K through second grade, their focus is on treating your elders with respect, making sure they get enough rest, making sure they eat healthy, making sure they exercise, getting some pop culture and influence and creativity and, a foundation of that and critical thinking. Then they bring in basic math and reading and, so I mean, it's a totally different world to what we know here and are used to in the States. It's pretty incredible, actually, if you really jump in and do a deep dive into it.
Right. And you got this love triangle. And again, I love how subtle it is. It's not like prominent, like, it's kind of cliche now, the love triangle. And it's like this whole movie boils down to a love triangle. It's not huge, but it's kind of like an arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Takashi Shimura's character's daughter is promised in marriage to this doctor who is very troubled.
Yeah.
Now he has one eye, and again, he wasn't that big of a deal in the original script. He was only in it for a couple scenes. But Serizawa is probably the most significant character in the movie, because this guy, you look in a lab and you're like watching a Universal Monsters movie. You think you're in Dr. Frankenstein's lab. Yeah. It's a very mysterious thing. A lot of mysterious things he's doing. There's all these tubes and it's kind of a nod to the Universal Monster craze of the 30s, obviously. Right. But Serizawa is a very troubled guy because he's come up with this destructive weapon by mistake. He didn't mean to come up with it. It's called the Oxygen Destroyer. And he is so troubled by how this could be taken and used in the wrong hands in a bad way. And he's they want him to use it to destroy Godzilla, but he doesn't want to use it. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to open up that can of worms. And there's this, after Godzilla's horrifying destruction of the city, it was almost like Hiroshima, Nagasaki Part 2.
Right.
I mean, it shows the devastation. He hears this children's choir. We're going to talk about the music in just a little bit here. But Serizawa hears the music, and he finally, like, I've got to do this. But he destroys all of his papers on it, and he's the one that's going to go down and use it, and he's going to kill himself in the process. Mm-hmm. So this poor guy, I mean, he was promised to be married to this woman. Obviously, she doesn't love him in that way. It was an arranged marriage.
Right.
She obviously doesn't love the guy. And he kind of knows it, too, and he just kind of accepts it, but he's a very tragic figure.
Yeah.
Because he's a brilliant genius, but he created something that was just so awful. And they even say, well, you know, as long as it stays in your head, he goes, well, what if they capture me? What if they force me to say it?
Right.
You know, and it's just it feels like it's a real movie. It's because of Honda's brilliant direction, and you can't talk about Ishiro Honda without talking about Akira Kurosawa. I mean, he was Kurosawa's assistant on so many movies. You look at Stray Dog, there's like a couple of scenes that Honda himself shot. And he helped him out as Kurosawa got older. They were like best friends. They were like real. Imagine having Kurosawa being your best friend, and you know, you make films yourself and you guys help each other out. It's like, because Kurosawa is considered the master of cinema. I mean, it's like the guy made 30 movies, and arguably all of them are good.
Yeah.
There are some that are lesser, but a lesser Kurosawa movie is a great movie for somebody else. But Ishiro Honda worked as his assistant for a while, and he got a good crack at Godzilla, and he showed how masterful he is capturing all of these situations. Because you had the Tsuburaya, who was also good at controlling weather scenes in movies.
Sure.
There's horrific rainfall and devastation, and then you have Honda's brilliant direction. It made for just such unique and top-notch filmmaking. But yeah, Serizawa, he's got this burden, and he doesn't want anyone else to know about this oxygen destroyer, and they don't really talk about it in any other movie because that's it.
Yeah.
He does, and it's good. I'm glad they didn't like bring it up again, because I think it was kind of stupid. They kind of allude to it a little bit in The King of the Monsters in 2021. Ken Watanabe's character, he's kind of related to Serizawa. They kind of bring up his character a little bit in that one, which is kind of a good homage, but he sacrifices himself in that movie. I don't know if you remember that, to help Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic that he's kind of doing somewhat similar things like Serizawa did in this one. This one he destroyed. And it's kind of ironic because they both, Godzilla and Serizawa, were both unfortunate their problems were caused by the nuclear bomb and war and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of symbolic that they were both destroyed together. So just, I mean, you read behind the scenes, Adam. You haven't seen the Japanese version yet, but have you honestly ever seen a movie of this caliber like this?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I'm going to, but you can definitely tell just from what came after it, the impact it had on all cinema and pop culture. I mean, like, you're talking about this this oxygen eliminator bomb. I mean, like, the first thing that popped into my head was the 60s clay animation Mad Monster House with Boris Karloff and Phil Stiller.
About that. Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, I've seen it, and
I've heard about it. Though.
But the ending is quite literally the ending of this movie. Boris Karloff, now it's not a Godzilla monster, but it's like a King Kong monster who's trying to destroy his island, and he has a potion that's basically like a
oxygen destroyer.
It's like an oxygen destroyer. He doesn't call it an oxygen destroyer. It's like it just erases matter, and he flies a plane with this thing into the King Kong monster, and boom, they're gone. You know, and so like the influence is everywhere.
Right.
And I mean, just with Godzilla alone, I mean, again, the pop culture. I'm sitting here and you're talking about the plot and the effects, and I'm just ticking off so many pop culture references that I've seen growing up.
Right.
That so I mean, again, even something as silly as children's Power Rangers. The Green Ranger, the Dragon Zord, is Godzilla. I literally when the
I never watched the show.
Yeah, like the original show from '92 that was inspired off the original Japanese children's show.
Right.
The Green Power Ranger literally summons his Dragon Zord and it comes out of the water. It is Godzilla in robot form. Yeah.
No kidding.
I mean, so it's...
Well, that's the thing. We look at Godzilla and how it's evolved over the years and going from just like a killing machine to like a savior of the children.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot of downs, but there's a lot of ups in the franchise. But this original is just... And John Carpenter himself, we were talking about franchise. We just talked about Halloween not too long ago. John Carpenter, one of his favorite movies is Godzilla.
Yeah.
He loves it. And every filmmaker probably, he was a kid when that came out, so was a lot of other kids. And I don't think they got to see that Godzilla movie unless they traveled overseas and watched at different festival circuits. But it's just such a massive achievement. And we can't talk about Godzilla without talking about the film composer, Akira Ifukube. He is just such an amazing and genius composer. The guy was in forestry, for crying out loud, for many years. And he taught music, and he obviously became a famous film composer. And the music of Godzilla, it's like the march, the theme. There's like 3 different themes in this Godzilla film that are just so you can hum them. I'm not going to hum them now because I'm not much of a singer.
Right.
But we played a little bit of the theme at the beginning to go into this discussion, and he is the one that came up with the roar of Godzilla. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They tried mixing different animal sounds, birds, gorillas. Didn't really work. So Akira Ifukube used a musical instrument. He loosened the lowest strings of a contrabass. So imagine a contrabass. It's kind of like a cello-looking thing.
Yeah.
He loosened the lowest strings, rubbed them with a leather glove, and then he altered the pitch through recording, speed, and add some reverb to it.
Yeah. It's
Genius.
iconic. It's iconic.
Yeah.
And, I was going to bring that up. Like, how do you know how they made the sound? And, like, and it's kind of too bad that they're not using that same...
They
to a degree.
Godzilla -1.
Do they use
we're going to talk about that because that's a Japanese production.
Yeah.
The Japanese productions still use that iconic roar.
Very cool.
They've changed it up a little bit, but it's still very much Akira's roar.
Yeah.
And it's such an ingenious thing. And the thump. Yeah. Apparently he tripped and fell on some sort of effects. You would probably know some sort of amplifier effect boom or something. He tripped on it and it made this boom sound. So he literally did that. And if you watch, like, the movie starts off with a thump. It's like Godzilla's stomp.
Yeah.
That's Godzilla's stomp. So not only did this guy like create memorable music for the film, but he came up with a good chunk of the sound effects.
That's cool.
It's genius.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, who would have thought loosening strings on a contrabass and then rubbing it with a leather glove to...
Yeah.
It's not something you would think of.
Yeah.
But it's so iconic. You just add some reverb to it. You add this. It's genius.
The fun part of movie making.
Yeah. I know there's some of that that's still happening now, but we don't hear about it as much. Maybe some of these other movies, and I know a lot of people love Dune. I don't love it as much as other people do, but well, maybe that will be, maybe there's some special stuff in that movie, but it's just so cool that this guy, he loved music, but he was in forestry for all those years, and then he just comes out, teaches music, and then he's, hired to do these film scores. And like Boris Karloff, he loved doing all the monster scores. He kind of got typecast, if you will, into doing all of he did the Mothra themes. But not only that, the songs. Yeah. He came up with the Mothra theme, the one that the two famous pop singers sing. And it's iconic. I mean, that Mothra theme, people hum all the time.
Sure.
And they got like a girls' choir to sing a powerful song at the end of the original Godzilla movie. That's the one that Serizawa really doesn't want to use, the oxygen destroyer. He's kind of on the fence, and then he hears that. Yeah. Okay, I'll do it. Yeah. It's such a powerful moment in the movie, and it tears me up every time I watch it. It's just so powerful. But Akira, he did all of that music. He did the lyrics and all of that. It's just, and they got like a real Japanese girls' choir to sing in the movie. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. But I mean, it's just such a I hate to use the term monster achievement, but I mean, 70 years and it shows no signs of slowing down. I know the guy who directed Godzilla -1 wants to remake Godzilla versus Hedorah. I don't know if you ever watched that one.
I haven't seen that one, no.
That's the one where Godzilla flies.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah. And he fights because that every Godzilla movie as palm and face as some of the plots are, it makes you shake your head, makes you roll your eyes. They're all satire of some kind. Right. And there was this, I wish I could remember the name of the author, the guy they interviewed. He goes, as long as there's human arrogance and ignorance, there will always be Godzilla. So it's just, it's a timeless theme of man thinking they're better than everyone. And I love how Ishiro Honda focuses on the scientists, the regular people, actually doing, getting together to fight back against the monster rather than the government and the military. That is one thing, because you know how I feel about politicians, Adam. Right. I think most of them are useless. Probably, I would say almost all of them are useless. And they're the reasons why we're in the predicaments we have always been in. Even World War II, there's all sorts of information. Hey, they knew about Pearl Harbor. We don't want to go into all that stuff. Right. But still, Ishiro Honda really put the spotlight on the regular people, the scientists. And I'm not a huge scientist guy either, especially if it's controlled by government. But there is something to be said for, getting together as a group of people and then fighting back against the oppression or whatever the monster is, right? Whether it's a real monster or a figurative one, right? And the movie just is just as powerful 70 years later as it is today, I think. So, and the home video stuff again, you couldn't get it until 2004, right? Not here in America. I mean, again, you could import it, but you wouldn't get subtitles. So unless you knew Japanese, right. You watch a bootleg copy of the Japanese version of Godzilla and there's no subtitles. Yeah. Unless, I don't know if there was any black market stuff. I'm sure there was. Yeah. But officially, Toho released it. They gave it a theatrical run for its 50th anniversary. And they had a limited edition DVD. They're like Disney in a lot of ways. They'll throw it out there for a little while, then they'll take it off. Back. Although Criterion got a hold of it and released the gigantic box set, which I absolutely love, which encompasses all 15 of the original show. They call it the Showa era. Yeah, that was the dynasty of Hirohito, I think. And technically, I don't know why they didn't include Godzilla in 1984, because that was kind of the end of the Showa era, and then it went into the Heisei era. The Heisei era lasted until like 1999, and then there's the Millennium era of Godzilla, and then they, I don't want to focus it on too much, but in 1998, that really bad American production with Matthew Broderick, and I love how they took that same replica in the next movie and completely obliterated it within minutes, because that was their way. This movie was a piece of garbage. We know it, and that was the thing that's really troubling, especially the movie that you and I saw with Raymond Burr inserted. Right. There is a character that is a reporter that kind of acts as like the Raymond Burr character, even though he's only in it pretty much at the beginning and a couple of scenes near the end. Inserting Raymond Burr now, after seeing the original, it's kind of like forced, to say the least, but they re-edited certain scenes. They took out Takashi Shimura's paleontologist because of the powerful statements he made about the nuclear bomb. They took out any reference to anyone using the nuclear bomb in the American version, and they just completely re-edited it. I don't think the filmmakers were too happy. I don't think Yoshiro Honda was happy. I don't think the distributors were happy, but they were happy with the money they got from it. Right. Because to this day, that is still the most popular version of Godzilla. Well, worldwide.
Worldwide. It's the most seen version. I remember growing up in the Turner stations would have Godzilla marathons, and that's where the marathon started with Raymond Burr. Look, we can talk about when did the Raymond Burr come on? It was
1956. It was like 2 years after. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, not to make excuses for anything, but we're talking not even 10 years had passed since we dropped those bombs. Everything was so sensitive. So I can kind of understand a reasoning to want to kind of whitewash the nuclear bomb context at that time.
Right. I'm glad they finally warmed up to it 50 years later.
Yeah. But still.
Can't believe it took that long.
But still, put yourself in the time and I'm not saying they should have done it, but I can understand why they did it.
Right. Well, they kind of did that with a lot of like King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah.
That was the thing. There was always this rumor. It was and that's all it was a rumor, where Godzilla beats King Kong in the Japanese version. Right. No, same ending. But it's like you're watching a completely different movie, and we'll talk about that when we talk more about King Kong versus Godzilla. But they did that with Ghidorah, and it's like, okay, you watch the American version of Ghidorah, you have the alien possessing the princess. I'm not of this earth. And then the Japanese version, I'm from Venus, and I'm telling you, Ghidorah, this monster is going to destroy Earth like it did Venus. It's like completely different. It's like a completely different movie.
Right.
And they chopped like minutes off of the movie. It's like Ghidorah with, I think it was like 95 minutes. They chop it down to like 85. It's like, why? What 10 minutes is it going to be that excruciating? It wasn't like it was a 5-hour movie.
Right.
It just blew my mind. Like when all of these Godzilla movies were released from Toho in their original language, like the running times were anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes longer. It's like,
yeah.
And again, it wasn't like it was a big amount of time difference. So it just leaves you scratching your head. Why?
Right.
Again, I guess it has something to do with the 60s and 70s.
But there could have been 100 different reasons to do it.
Well, and then Godzilla raids again. That was like, boom, the immediate follow-up, So November 3rd, Godzilla opens everywhere in Japan. It premiered October 27th. Hey, we're talking on the day it premiered.
Yeah.
As we're recording this. And it was such a huge success that they, like they did with King Kong, let's do a sequel, and they rush and do Godzilla raids again. But in America, they completely call it the Cosmic Monster. They know no reference to Godzilla.
Yeah.
And you get the Godzilla facing off another monster for the first time.
Right.
In Girius. So, and that was the start of Godzilla versus
everything.
Yeah. But yeah, the second one, Godzilla Raids Again, which was like months, April of 1955. So literally like 6 months.
Yeah.
Boom, you got another Godzilla movie. And even though it was rushed, there are still some good stuff about that movie. Ishiro Honda was not involved in that.
Right.
He wouldn't get involved again until 1962 with King Kong versus Godzilla. But what an impact. What do you think? Have you seen the Japanese version of Godzilla yet? If you haven't, well, I don't want to smack at him, but you got to see it. It's, if you're a fan of cinema in general, but even if you're not a fan of monster movies, I think you will enjoy the original Gojira, Godzilla, because in Japan it's Gojira. Mm-hmm. It's a timeless masterpiece. I could just go on saying it's a masterpiece for another 3 hours, and how awe and my jaw dropped the whole time I'm watching the 95-minute long movie. But you go see it for yourself. They just released, or they're going to be releasing a 4K. Criterion is going to be releasing a 4K upgrade of their Blu-ray of Godzilla. So it's definitely worth your time. So if you've seen the original Godzilla, comment below. Tell us what you think. Not a fan of that? I don't care. I'd like to hear about it too. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a Scared for Reals episode. And I forgot to mention that at the beginning, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our handle is at Scared for Reals.